nobody bought the rights to anything. They basically, they were distributors would come to them with films, that they would want to, market. And the thing was, everything that was big, and like I said, we didn't have, it was no internet back in the 70s and the 60s, whatever, and even up toward the 80s, nobody was using the internet. So you had to use gimmicks to promote films. And one thing that these theaters did was they had these huge plywood mock-ups of what was going on in the film. Like Make Them Die Slowly is the best example because they had the severed heads hanging there, the mutilated corpses. They had all these lobby cards, all these stills, and they had a monitor running the trailer like 24/7. So on a street level, that just drew people in. And then the other thing was they used to have radio spots where, you're listening to FM radio, and all of a sudden it breaks in. The third recipient of the head transplant died today. Go see Beast of Blood at the theater near you. That type of shit.
Yeah.
So it was like incessantly pounding on you where, you would want to go see this. Then they had the 30-second TV spots and things like that. So the big thing was the poster would draw you in because if you I never looked at a theater times table when I was doing that. I looked up at the marquees and the posters and said eeny, meeny, miny, mo, where are you spending the night tonight,
Yeah. So I guess,
and,
go ahead.
Go ahead. No, they would have huge mock-ups of things like when, Sabata came out, they had like a stand of him on the marquee of the theater, and underneath it said, Lee Van Cleef is Sabata. When I'm trying to think, Equinox is the name of the film, but they threw it out on video as The Beast.
Okay.
That was an early anime thing with David Allen and a bunch of guys, and trying to think who directed it. The guy from WKRP that played Herb was in it. But, they had, these big monsters. And they had mock-ups of these monsters standing in front of the theaters. So, this was, and then when you went to the soft X and the hard X stuff, I mean, that shit was all over the place. Huge tits sticking out, duct tape over the chicks' crotches and things like that.
Right.
So it was like, such an assault on the senses walking up there that's how everything was promoted.
And it's like it seems like different theaters promoting these movies, but they're all owned by the same corporation. So it's like they could control how they wanted the aesthetic of that entire area to be for the most part. So that even just walking up looking at those big marquees, like you're gonna draw foot traffic towards it, not even with the usual crowd just to experience it.
Yeah. Well, Terry Levine, who owned this Aquarius Releasing, his office, I believe, was over the Selwyn. So, and this is on the Dr. Butcher Cannibal Apocalypse DVD. He has an interview in there, which is great, he came up with some stuff that I didn't even think of. His office was right across the street from the other side of the thing. And when he saw what Make Them Die Slowly was doing, he wanted to top it.
Yeah.
So he bought Cannibal Apocalypse and took a pre-title sequence that Roy Frumkes had shot for some film that never got finished and used that and came up with Dr. Butcher MD. And I believe he was working with Rick Sullivan of the Gore Gazette at the time because Rick was a film distributor too. And they built this operating room set up on a flatbed truck with bloody nurses, mutilated bodies, the whole bit. They drive around, the cops would bust them, they'd get locked up. Terry would bail them out, and they'd start all over again. And they also had an ambulance tricked out as the Dr. Butcher Bloodmobile, where they were driving around taking people's blood pressure. And I told Ian McCulloch this, and he goes, seriously? I never heard of that. And I go, well, you did the film. And he goes, yeah. He goes, but, we never knew it went over there and did this type of thing. And I said, yeah, they pushed it big time. It didn't do what Make Them Die Slowly did, but certainly delivered the really fucked up, gory shit that we all wanted to see back then.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's just like such a direct way to market too, because with something like that, not only are you promoting the story to the movie to the person who you're interacting with, but you're giving them a story that they're going to take to their friends, and they're gonna go around. Hey, you see this fucked up ambulance that they took my blood pressure. There was a bunch of bodies in there, bags of blood. It was crazy.
Yeah, you know Bob Morawski from Grindhouse Releasing, right?
I don't know him personally, but I've heard of him.
Okay, yes. you know Grindhouse Releasing.
Yeah, right.
Okay. He emailed me a picture of a theater which wound up, I thought it was a Liberty, but it was Rialto. and they were putting out pieces at the time on Blu-ray, and he said, "Why would they pair pieces with The Hills Have Eyes?" And I said, "Because The Hills Have Eyes, everybody knew about The Hills Have Eyes. It was a proven draw.
Yeah.
So let's just say that Pieces really sucked. Being that The Hills Have Eyes was with it would make it not suck so much because the people wouldn't feel disappointed because they get to see The Hills Have Eyes again. So actually, Pieces didn't suck."
Yeah. Pieces is without a doubt one of the best chainsaw killer movies that, besides maybe the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's definitely top 5.
Yeah. But see, the whole trick these guys do, the distributors, it wasn't so much the theater owners. They would have to get the stuff from the distributors, but it was what? Okay, this is new. We don't know a shitting thing about it, but we know that this film, that if we stick it with it,
yeah,
would work it. So they were using, it's in one of the issues of the Grindhouse Purgatories. I took the weirdest pairings from the listings I had for 42nd Street.
Mm-hmm.
Like, here we go. The Street Fighter, Return of the Street Fighter, Slave of the Cannibal God. That's triple feature. Yeah, stuff like that. It was amazing what they were pairing. One I remember Animal House with Zombie. I mean, I'm like, it was weird, back in the 70s, but as you got closer to the 80s, the independent product over here dried up because basically, the mainstream companies were making horror films or buying, indie stuff, like especially the slasher films, which I fucking can't stand because there was so many of them.
Yeah.
And, all right, they had these things, but, to pair them up with different things, that's when all of a sudden they started bringing in the Italian stuff. Because that was basically 42nd Street's last hurrah as far as really fucked up shit was the Italian invasion.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. A lot of the one thing that folks need to understand about the Grindhouse is that it was an artistic expression to push the boundaries as far as you could for the time and place. And without that kind of splatter horror, the movies like Zombie, you'd never be able to have the companies would have never seen how profitable horror was at such a low cost to make, that you would have never had the explosion of, slasher films and horror films on the VHS market. And then it would have never gained as much mainstream approval, giving you something like The Walking Dead, which is on a mainstream network.
Yeah. Well, right after Jaws and Star Wars came out, Roger Corman said it best. They finally got it. We're screwed.
Yeah.
That's when they got it. But like, you still had theatrical at that point, and those theaters were still viable. So that's when I say the thing was after, when Dawn of the Dead came out, and all of a sudden Jerry Gross again brought in Zombie. And that sort of kicked open the doors for, okay, this stuff's really extreme and fucked up, and we can get it on the cheap because we can go over to Italy and get it.
Yeah.
We can bring it in. So, you had that. You had, they were going to push this one. It was going to be Twilight of the Dead, and then Romero sued. Then it became Gates of Hell, and it was City of the Dead, the Fulci stuff, and the Argento stuff. So this was stuff that nobody got away with before. And like I said, they get it on the cheap. And somebody said something about there's no way anybody could have slapped a fucking R rating on Carnivorous, a.k.a. Jungle Holocaust. There's no way anybody gave that an R rating. Somebody just slapped that on there to throw people off. Because these operators, they didn't give a shit. That was the fun part about 42nd Street in general, that there was such a criminal element involved in just about everything over there that nobody really gave a shit. They get away with murder.
Yeah.
What Terry Levine, came up with, and I never even thought it is, because everybody thought what killed it was, okay, the crack epidemic, the AIDS epidemic, the greedy realtors, whatever. The whole thing was, when the city people sat down and saw that for the square footage of that area and the tax revenue that was coming in, there was hardly anything coming in. They were pocketing everything. So, toward the end, that's why it just went to shit, because nobody was putting money into fixing everything up because they all knew it was up. They were all going to go out. I can't remember anybody ever charging me sales tax for anything in a porn store. And I can't remember even getting a fucking ticket from one of those grindhouses. They just took your $1.50 or $3 and waved you in.
Yeah.
So that was the whole thing. It would all boil down to the almighty dollar. If they probably had paid off the right people and paid, enough to keep it going, it would have worked. But then, the whole thing was, it was getting dangerous too. The crack stuff. just people being fucked up in general, and the place was getting decrepit. There's a whole big difference between the 70s and the 80s. Like, I was over there, like, I'd say, like 68, drinking underage, and hung over there until the early 80s, and that's when the big change came, where it just wasn't fucking fun anymore.
Yeah.
Get too dangerous. Plus, I got involved in the business anyway with selling shit, so I was only over. I didn't have really the time I wanted to spend to go to those things. I get to place in Jersey too, so.
Well, I guess let me ask you about the vibe that was going on, in the Grindhouse scene. I guess kind of how it evolved. So, it's obviously it was obviously a party scene. You'd have different folks going in for triple features, bringing in bottles, stuff like that. What was it like there?
And you could smoke in there too, so nobody, you could smoke weed. Nobody gave a shit because they were smoking cigarettes.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess also throughout the 70s, too, is when you had, Roger Corman did The Trip, and you had all these psychedelic movies. So I assume there's a lot of LSD use and a lot of different, party drugs getting used as well.
Yeah, I was just buds and suds myself. I didn't give a shit what anybody else did. I'd sneak a pint of, wine or hard stuff in, with the weed that I'm smoking right now. There was one theater called the Elgin, which was far away from that whole scene. And they created the Midnight movie down there, and it was like, a 200-seat theater full of potheads. Who was going to tell them to put it out?
Yeah, it's your bread and butter right there.
Yeah, but there's this whole thing about Quentin Tarantino, how he's got everybody convinced that he grew up in watching movies with a black audience in grindhouses, and when you do the math of his fucking age, all the shit was over by then.
Wasn't he from Tennessee?
Yeah, I don't really see a great plethora of grindhouses in Tennessee.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he's...
Then he said he went to California, and somebody was like, I said, dude, I'm not blowing my own fucking horn. I said, but, okay, basically, I was dropped off at a kiddie matinee, which was 2 horror films, a Three Stooges short, and 4 Warner Brothers cartoons when I was like fucking 12 years old. That's how I grew up in this shit. And it was in a prominently black neighborhood. Right. And there was never any issues. Fights would break out between assholes because fights break out between assholes. In grindhouses, fights would break out between assholes because of the fucking liquor and shit, Yeah,
yeah.
I got one story. I think I don't know if it made the last book, or I wrote something about it. Getting this chick I was hanging out with, which was she was a barmaid / escort or whatever. She used to do diet pills, and she got all fucking wired on this shit. So we went to see something, and I don't know, something happened. She drew the ire of this black dude sitting in front of us, and she went, "What are you looking at, motherfucker?" I'm like, don't. Then they go back and forth, and bitch slap, and I'm like, okay, no, and I'm like, dude, I'm out of here, and we went out the exit. I'm like, I ain't getting involved in this shit.
Yeah.
And then it was, oh, he was mean to me. And I said, no, it's the fucking pills talking. And then somebody was coming out another exit, and I says, well, we're not going to lose the night. And I snuck in the other exit to another film. I think that was Satan's Black Wedding and The Brute Corpse. And that was a confusing fucking film because it was about the black 2 brothers, somebody with a vampire ring, people getting bit, staked out, hot chicks covered with blood, naked, and we never got to see Satan get married anyway.
Yeah.
And then the Brute Corpse, this is how fucked up Lisa was because she, like I said, whacked on pills. As soon as this thing started, I knew it was going to be a piece of shit because it looked like somebody backed a truck over the print. She thought it was going to be a Pam Grier movie, and I'm like, no, I really don't think so. It's not going to be a Pam Grier movie. It was okay for what it was because it had a lot of good character actors like Alex Rocco, Roy Jensen, Michael Pataki, and a few other people, but really a nasty fucking rape movie with mercenaries and shit.